welcome everyone to the Tamil Monks YouTube channel and welcome Comrade Vijay Prashad.
On. I mean, I think that what the IPCC has produced as a body of work is a pretty comprehensive storyline that make their money in fossil fuels. So most governments are actually unwilling to see that the cause of the climate catastrophe, of environmental destruction, largely baked into the structure of the capitalist mode of production. That's most governments. And
Technology and also the amount of abundance in the Western countries. I want to touch upon the technology with this question. So, how does tech advancement in the capitalist society, I mean, and that is the contemporary society, impact the global climate, and what is the solution for minimizing the climate crisis that occurs due to the technology, due to the advancement of technology?
yeah, so there's, I think, a couple of things again. One is that, for a long time, for decades really, there's been a lot of talk about recycling, reusing, repurposing, not relying on new production, but utilizing old materials and so on. And in many countries around the world, people would separate out bottles, plastic bottles, glass bottles, paper, and so on. It turned out, of course, that this was a marginal part of the use of raw materials, that very marginal section, that the bulk of new production wasn't reusing old materials. It was effectively creating new materials, particularly in plastic. The amount of plastic produced in the world is absolutely obscene. Plastic has a great advantage in that it's in a sense cheaper to produce, but with great environmental costs that are externalized. But also, plastic means that there's a kind of ceaseless demand for it. Whereas, for instance, if you didn't have plastic bags at markets, and you had to bring your own bag, as one used to before plastic bags became quote unquote cheapened. Then the production of plastic bags for that entire sector is unable to create commodities upon commodities because you're reusing things. Reuse, repurpose, and so on. It's okay as a moral idea, but under the conditions of capitalism, it's in direct conflict. In an economy that requires the ceaseless production of commodities, the purchase of commodities, the use of commodities, and so on. And so there's an enormous amount of waste generated as a consequence of this ceaseless production and sale of commodities. There's an entire island in the northern Pacific, which is a plastic island, where plastic just sits in the ocean, damages marine life, interferes with the life cycle of fish and other animals in the ocean, and it's just grotesque. It's the flotsam of capitalism. It's capitalism's obscenity sitting there in the Pacific Ocean. And of course, this is not just in the Pacific. If you go to any beach around the world, the amount of junk that washes up is unbelievable. I mean, plastic bags and so on, which kill marine animals. They mistake them for perhaps sea life, and they eat them, and then it's a terrible problem for dolphins and other fish. So one aspect of this is that our technologies, the technologies we keep creating, like plastic, for instance, doesn't actually help the climate or environmental crisis, exacerbates it. I mean, look at India. India for 100 years, when you board a train, you'd get your tea in a mud cooler made out of mud. You drink your tea and you could throw it out of the window, and it would just go back to the earth. This had two benefits. One is that it kept employed, tens of thousands of people who made these coolers. Now, I'm not necessarily in favor of keeping people employed to do handicraft work. It would be nice if it could be mechanized. People could make more money and so on, make a richer life for themselves, but still get people employed. And secondly, you could throw it out of the window and it quote unquote recycles back to nature. Well, the Indian railways decided that this is too prehistoric, that they needed plastic cups. You see, the habits of travelers are the same. They drink the tea in the plastic cup, throw it out of the window. So the train lines littered with plastic, which is eaten again by animals. It's not very good for them. And secondly, now it advantages big corporations that make plastic out of petroleum, a fossil fuel, not coolers and so on. So sometimes technological progress can be quite harmful to nature, can be quite harmful to humanity as well. The other thing is the technological fix to get us out of this, the dream that to go away from, let's say, carbon, we're going to move to, say, batteries, or something. Well, but the fact is that most of the green technologies that are on the table are actually quite harmful in their own way. The mining of lithium, for instance, is its own problems. The mining of cobalt, coltan in the Congo produces its own problems. And also, there's really been no major technological fix. Now, it's possible. Humans are ingenious. They might come up with something. Maybe somebody is going to figure out how to take energy out of something quite commonplace, seawater, perhaps, not just through tides, but somehow to extract the energy from the water itself. These things are all possible. But to hold on to this and hope against hope that somebody is going to invent some device that's going to save us from the climate catastrophe, that's going to eat the carbon from the atmosphere, these things are not only unlikely, but I think it gives us the opportunity not to deal with things now, to keep waiting for a technological fix. And I think that's a problem.
Yeah. Also, there is a false sense of hope that's been like given to the people with like modern and fancy words like this. Yeah, I totally understand, and I can totally relate. So, which brings me to the next question. So, there is this narrative that's been like frowned upon many people and general public, saying that the climate change is not political. It's like we need to look at it as its own issue, and it's apolitical. Uh, what do you think about this narrative? Because it's been like going around heavily. We are talking about the mode of production being the main cause of this climate crisis, but at the same time, there's significant amount of general public who believes or who are like tuned to believe that the climate crisis is not political and it's its own issue. Like, how do we deal this, or how do we address this?
Well, frankly, I would like it to be non-political. I would like it to be universally acknowledged for what it is, and I'd like to see 7.98 billion people marching in lockstep to try to transform the way we live in the world. We want to make things like this not political. I mean, what does it mean to say something is political? To say it's political means that there are disagreements amongst people, that there are significant disagreements about the cause of something. There are disagreements about how to fix it, if there is even an agreement that there's a problem. And then there's a disagreement about the cost to be borne for fixing something. Those disagreements between people is what we call politics. Yes, I would like it not to be political. I'd like everybody to agree that that the climate and environmental catastrophe is caused by the capitalist mode of production. I would like everybody to agree that the way to transit out of this particular problem of the environmental crisis and the climate crisis is to transform the way we produce things, how we distribute things, how we consume things. Let's move beyond the forces of profit that seem to care less about what they call externalities. It's in the science of capitalism, which is economics, that the term externalities appears. In other words, it's in economics, mainstream legacy economics, neoclassical economics, that you get a literature on the external cost. What does this mean? I'm a factory and I produce, say, a chicken for consumption. And in the factory, we cut the chicken and there's fat and blood and so on. And I let the fat and blood run into a local river because, I don't need it. I'm not going to make money from all of that. I'm going to make money selling the chicken. Well, I just throw the fat and the blood into the river and it pollutes the river. Now, who's going to pay the cost of cleaning up the river? Well, as far as the factory is concerned, the business is concerned, it treats those as external costs. They are not costs that they bring onto their balance sheet because they're not going to pay to clean it up. Those are called externalities. There are lots of these negative externalities that exist. Pollution from factories out of smokestacks was a negative externality. Somebody had to pay the cost for that. Well, it was society or nature that ended up paying the cost. When you throw, say, chicken blood into a river, that impacts the ecosystem. It impacts marine life again, fish in the river. It impacts plants and so on. It has its own impact on the ecology. They are paying the cost for it. Humans are paying the cost for it. Drinking water is polluted and so on. So yes, the moment you recognize that within the capitalist structure, there is a disagreement about how to deal with these issues. That when the capitalist science says there are external costs and they are borne by society, well, then there's a debate. Liberals say let's have firms internalize the cost. How much are firms willing to internalize the cost? That brings in the class struggle. There's a class struggle. Firms are not willing to internalize costs. They want to externalize the cost as much as possible. And the moment you have a class struggle, you have disagreements. When you have disagreements, you have politics. And so right now, politics surrounds both the environmental question, environmental degradation, and the climate question. It's not that these things are necessary. Like again, I would hope that vast majorities of people are created by political struggle, who believe that we have to exit this way of doing things. You have to exit this way of doing quote unquote business. Production cannot be like this. It has to be on a different footing, a much more social footing. When more and more people take that opinion, maybe we will have these issues transcend politics. But right now you can't. The reason you can't is at the heart of the environmental crisis, at the heart of the climate crisis is the class struggle. And that's why politics is all over it.
Yeah, thank you. My last question. We discussed this whole time, but I just want to ask this question too. How the capitalists are using the climate change propaganda for their own profiteering? Because we see all these big movements, big propaganda, and big advertisements from the big corporations, saying that they are doing their best to produce ecologically better products that has minimal effect on the environment. So how do we address this, and how do we see this?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question. Look, it's a fact that there's a climate crisis and an environmental crisis. I think this most big capitalists generally agree on. Even oil companies seem to want to say we are green BP or we are green Shell and so on. I think it is now widely acknowledged that there's an issue. If not the owners of hedge funds or the leaders of these corporations, their children are certainly yelling at them and saying the planet is being destroyed. What are you doing about it? So there's a widespread acknowledgement of a problem. Now, having acknowledged there's a problem is not itself enough, because then comes the issue. How do you spin a problem? You see, you can have people like oil company executives say, we are making a transition. We are moving from fossil to other fuels. We are moving to clean energy. So you then create this image of clean energy. For instance, natural gas is suddenly clean energy. But natural gas is also a fossil fuel. It's not a fossil fuel, and particularly when you have liquefied natural gas. Imagine you're liquefying a fossil fuel, carrying it over large distances, de-liquefying it. There's an enormous, energy burden on the planet to utilize a fuel like that. But they are able to brand these things as not environmentally dirty. Clean energy is a very clever branding device. This lengthens the time scale for firms to do essentially nothing. I mean, if you can parcel out and say there's dirty energy, coal, and clean energy, natural gas, then we can enter this era of clean fossil fuels for a while until scientists are able to create a better fuel. Now, look, I don't. I know that we are in an era where we're going to move to these kind of fuels, more natural gas and so on. Also, coal is going to be used in a way they are now calling it clean coal. There's coal is going to be used and so on. Obviously, there's going to be a period of utilization of these fuels, but it's interesting to me how the big firms are rebranding the very same things that we were doing yesterday. They now call it clean. And for people who are desperate for a solution to this catastrophe, I mean, desperate for a solution, you hold on to that because you say, well, it's clean fuel. It's not the same old dirty fuel. And so this rebranding exercise has an impact in public perception. And climate activists who continue to say, got to do something, got to do something, don't appeal to large sections, particularly of middle classes of the world, who basically, are motivated by the desire not to have an inconvenient life. And so if a capitalist comes along and says, well, look, now we've cleaned up the energy, middle classes who don't want inconvenience are going to basically adopt that viewpoint. Which is why it's very important for movements, left movements, to be out there, not just saying there's a crisis, but to offer, credible, cogent solutions to this, to talk about how we need to think seriously about changing the way in which we produce things, how we consume things, without making this a question of personal consumption. I need to buy differently and so on. But how does a society, a civilization change things? Why is it more important for a country like India, for instance, to create greater, robust public transport and have less driving for cars, have less of a push for private cars? Look at the city of Delhi, when Gurgaon started exploding, people of some means, upper middle class, and so on, started moving to Gurgaon as a suburb of Delhi. The road between Gurgaon and Delhi is jam-packed. Now there's a metro that runs, a very good metro, but there's just not enough trains on that metro to carry the number of people to offset the cars. To think about moving beyond car culture to more public transport, more public goods in a way. That's a productive conversation rather than saying, we got to do something. Well, let's talk about practical things that we can do. Let's have more public transport in cities that are powered, by maybe solar, battery, and so on. Let's talk about that. Is there a way to do it? There are technologies available. So it's not that there are no technologies available. Is there a way to carry more goods by train, less goods by truck? These are the kinds of questions and discussions, practical things that people on the left need to engage in, to enter. We need to put forward practical, believable solutions to these problems, and not just stand on the mountain and yell and scream and say, there's a big problem.
Yeah, thank you so much, Comrade. That brings us to the end of the Q&A session, and very useful and important insights shared in this video. So thanks again for that. So I want you to share your conclude the session with your thoughts and summarize what needs to be done to tackle this issue.
I mean, it's hard to summarize it because the most important thing, I think, is what I said, from my perspective, what I just said, which is the need for people of the left to be offering clear, credible, and practical solutions to problems faced by people in our time now. And I think at the center of that is to talk more about the importance of creating public goods, the importance of creating energy companies as utilities, not as private companies, to run these utilities in an efficient way, to do as much as possible to effect forms of transition away from carbon and so on. I think the left making the argument for practical transitional solutions out of this crisis is the only way forward. We have to accept the fact that the environment and climate is being destroyed, but we also have to show that we have a exit from this crisis. That's the only way that we're going to be able to make this issue no longer political. We want to make this issue a human issue. We don't want this issue to be caught up in the branding, exercises of big corporations. We want this issue to be an issue where the class struggle is won by us, and it's won by the belief in our solutions, not just because we are saying so.
Thank you so much, Comrade. Appreciate your time again, and thanks for sharing your insights with this important issue of climate crisis.